Maybe we can start with nutrition for muscle growth. I think we can start there, and how you approach it specifically in the periods where your goal is to put on muscle, and how long of a stretch that will last before you say do a diet, for example, for fat loss. So how much time do you give yourself? You're obviously very advanced. Maybe it's different now than it was 10 years ago, 15 years ago. Maybe you could talk about the differences, and if there is differences, and how you approach that.
It's an interesting topic, and it's a minefield in certain instances. And I think a lot of confusion in the industry where some people try and overcomplicate I think, a simple thing. Why are people trying to overcomplicate a very simple process, from my perspective? And I think there has been quite a few trends of late that have been cyclic, that we used to do years back. And if you talk to some of the old timers, like, yeah, we did that and it doesn't work. So we've seen some of these things before. And I'll try and go through some of those, why I wouldn't suggest doing it, and possibly why you could get away with some of these things when you're a little bit younger, but certainly not as you approach your midlife and get into somebody like an OAP like me, old age pensioner. So when you want to get bigger, obviously you want to be in a surplus of some description. You should understand roughly what your calories are in order to have a healthy lifestyle. And obviously, if you want to get bigger, there needs to be a surplus if you want to put weight on. However, there seems to be a trend recently whereby, and again, it's something that we used to do many, many years ago, of really pushing that boundary of pushing your off-season weight up to a considerable level.
Where's that boundary? And here's what I mean by that. Let's say someone competes at 155 or 160. What would you... Perfect. That's perfect. So where would that boundary be in terms of what is too much now? Like, what weight are you touching where you're like, this is... Now we're getting into territory we shouldn't.
Generally, I'd go 14 pound above.
14 pounds above. Okay.
14 pound above with a reasonable level of body fat. You can be 20 pound above that with a really low margin of body fat, and you can't come down, or you can be a massive surplus of body fat over the top. It's that massive surplus of body fat that people are putting on that I don't think you need to do. I think there's a point where you're just going over and above what you need to be. So I generally competed around I weighed in at 154, but I would sit 172 maximum. I'd be sitting at competing at 11 stone. And sitting around 12 stone 4 roughly off season. There's a good reason behind this. I think you're not going to put on a massive amount of tissues, particularly if you've been in the game a little while. You're not going to see these massive growth spurts that you saw when you first came into the gym or when you're in your teens. Okay. So it's a little bit different for teens and stuff. You can really start pushing the calories in, but once you've been in the game for a little while, I feel you need to keep it reasonably close, what I would say reasonably close, 14 to 18 pound, where competition weight is.
So where's that period? So let's say, is it the 10-year mark, the 20-year mark, and a general, because there's of course individual specifics that we have to consider, but if we were going to generalize it to some extent, what would you say where you want to consider?
5 or 6 years. If you've had 5 or 6 years, then I don't think you see big benefits of doing these massive surplus out of season, because you've only got to get rid of it. Essentially, it's what do you want to do with that surplus. If you're doing strongman, where you've got to move a lot, shift a lot of weight, then it might benefit you. But the goal is to be conditioned. And if you've got to drop 3 stone, 40 pound, and you're going to give yourself 20 weeks to do it, you're looking at a 2 pound drop every single week. And that's going to be hard. And towards the end of that diet, that's going to start hitting you, because you've got to make that consistent drop over a long period of time. You've got to decrease your calories to such a level over a prolonged period of time that will impact on your training, as opposed to the person who is 14 pound out and has only got to drop 1 pound a week. They can have a higher amount of calories to diet on in order to hit the same shape as the other person. If you look at the amount of muscle that the person who's 40 pound overweight and what their stage weight is, the muscle mass should stay constant. That's another clear indication. If your muscle mass starts decreasing over time as you're progressing through your diet, you've set your calories too low. But you're setting your calories too low because you know the weight you've got to hit. And it's juxtaposition to what you want to do. So I think by having a higher amount of calories when you're dieting down, you retain the muscle mass. than trying to really drop down and then trying to do everything all at the last minute. And it just, yeah, it's not
not
ideal.
not as productive. Okay, so that's interesting. So your thought is that it's more so to do with the fact that there's much less calories to work with. Why strength?
Yeah, it's a calorie deficit.
Okay.
Going into your dieting phase,
Mhm.
and you can talk to any of my clients about, we get stronger, we don't get weaker. My clients don't get tired. Well, they get a tiny bit tired because we're up in the work rate, but you won't see their strength drop down. You'll see their strength massively increase.
Massively increase.
Massively increase. I've got people smashing their PBs coming into dieting phase.
Wow.
You know,
And is that because they're used to staying a little bit closer to stage weight potentially? Is that
they're staying a little bit close to stage weight. Their calories are still exactly where we need them to be. They're dropping down in weight. Their training is going 100%, and their training needs to remain at 100% because all of these gains that they did off season, if they suddenly start on, I'm a little bit tired, I can't train to the same capacity that I used to, and so they have to drop the weights, then all the gains that they had, they're going to lose anyway because they're not sustaining that drive and that intensity that they used to have. So if they're not lifting as big a weights, or if they're not pushing as many reps, then they're going to lose the tissue that they've gained. So they have to keep pushing, and you can only do that when your diet's 100%.
So what's the surplus of potential? An example.
Yeah.
Back, let's say after you've hit that 10-year mark. So let's say between year 10 and year 20, because now it's a little different how you're doing things. And we could talk about that as well. But let's say between year 10 and year 20. So I don't know, maybe your 30s, when you were in your 30s, what was the surplus looking like? 500 calories above maintenance, 1,000? Is that too much? What was it for you specifically? And were you tracking like to the gram on a food scale kind of thing?
No, well, I wasn't tracking off season. The only thing I was tracking off season was really my protein intake. I did go into let's try and understand whether this will work or not. So I did a year of really pushing the calories in, and it must have been 6,000 or 7,000 calories. It was horrendous.
Oh wow.
It was a good 400 grams of protein every single day.
But so what'd you get up to? What was the weight at that point? Like 200?
My weight, I got up to 14. I don't know what 14 stone I got up to off season. I don't know what's that in your.
Let's have a look.
So 172, 186, but yeah, about 200.
Yeah, that's about right. About 196. And so you're 5'7", Lee?
No.
5'4"?
5'4", 5'5".
Wow. So you're competing at 160, 155 at 5'4", and you got up to almost 200 pounds. That's definitely a lot for someone who's 5'4", right?
Yeah. So yeah, I come down and I had a different look, but I couldn't get that crispness. You know, the guys I was standing next to had that crispness around about their skin. I couldn't get it, you know.
How old were you at this point?
How old was I? Yeah, about 27, 28.
Okay. So after that point, so is that when you switched gears and you thought, okay, I'm not getting up to that weight anymore?
Yeah. I've tried it. I looked a bit bigger. I knew I had to put some mass on because it was the first or the second year I'd gone into the WNBF, and it was a bit of a rude awakening seeing these guys that were coming in, you know, between 200 and 250 pounds, and you go, oh my god, no weight classes. So you know, there was me at 154, and you go, oh my god, you know, you're going up against Jose Guzman, Eddie Hernandez, you know, you had Kai Greens, you know, these big guys. So you know, you have to put some size on. I looked good, but yeah, I didn't have my usual crispness. So then it was like, this isn't working. I need to understand what the judges are looking for, and it's not just size. It's that level of conditioning. As well, you know, if you're standing next to Dave Goodin and you're not conditioned, you'll look fat. You've got to be conditioned. He turned around, you looked at him from the rear, and you just saw these hams and glutes and lower back tying, and you went, oh yeah, you know, I was conditioned, but he just made me look not conditioned. So you think, well, yeah, something's got to change. You know, your skin will only take so much, and you know, going 40, 50 pound over what you should be weighing on stage, your skin, you know, you don't want the stretch marks or anything. You know, you want it all tight. When the skin's got to the point where you're creating that collagen in the skin, you're not going to get that back. That's gone. You've stretched it. You stretched it beyond a reasonable condition.
Yeah. And we were talking about that last time. I remember this specific topic got brought up with potentially having to deal with loose skin if you go so above and then drastically change that within a 5 to 6 month period. It's too much, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it only gets worse as you get older, because as you get older, you lose the elastin within your skin. If you go up to like a 20-year-old and you pinch the back of their hand, it reacts and draws back onto the hand quite quickly. You do that
Right.
with somebody who's 50 years old, and the skin stays where it is because it's got
Mm.
less elastin fibers in it. You haven't got that elasticity in the skin anymore. So it's just those little things that the Instagrammers are saying, oh yeah, you need to really push in the off season, really push the weight up. Well, yeah, when you're young, but when you get a little bit more mature, you've got to be a bit more level headed about this. You can't do those things. That it's not just jumping on the bandwagon because this person's got 10,000 followers or 50,000 followers or whatever. It's like you need to use a bit of common sense sometimes. And I think a lot of this isn't considered common sense or basic biology around what the body does.
Right. What do you think about the fact that some people will say, well, you're more advanced, so you need more resources, i.e. more food and more energy coming in order to build, because it's so hard to begin with. But from what I'm hearing now, it's almost like, well, there's only so much you need before it becomes excessive, right?
Yeah, I mean, we just need to go back to basics. You just need a healthy diet. That's the foundation of what you should be doing. You don't need a massive excess. You need a little bit of everything. So the body's got resources that it can take from everywhere. If you're just feeding it one type of protein, one type of carbohydrate, you're not nourishing it as much as it needs to be. You'll get a lot of people just sticking with one protein source or one protein source and a whey protein. And that's the foundation of their diet. And you think, well, as a person, you need something a lot more better and found that are more rounded than what you're currently presenting. So you need to give it a wide variety of proteins, a wide variety of carbohydrates, fruit, vegetables, and if you do all those things and bring it all together, then the body can draw on all of these things to build what it needs to build. But once you start inhibiting certain food groups and certain food types, then that's where you're going to have the problem. So you don't need to necessarily push it into a massive surplus. Just give it a good, balanced diet. And that's what I think we're missing in a lot of what we do.
With respects to progression, at what point might you increase load? And I think this is an important subject. Like, at what point will you say, okay, you know what? I think I'm ready for a little bit more load. And then how much might you add on something like, let's say, a machine or a dumbbell? Would it be the minimal amount that's available, or like how would you do things now?
Whenever I want to try and do something, first of all, I have to set a goal. I have to understand what my end point is. And then I have to